When the Dark Lord of the Sith crossed between universes, two worlds trembled at the meeting of powers never meant to touch. Across the cosmos, the Force shifted, whispering warnings as Vader's shadow fell upon Earth's heroes. His mechanical breathing echoed through Manhattan's canyons, his crimson blade carving through defenses no Jedi had ever challenged. The Avengers faced something beyond their understanding, not just a man-made machine, but a soul consumed by darkness yet still burning with purpose. What happens when the most feared enforcer in the galaxy confronts those who call themselves Earth's mightiest heroes? A disturbance rippled through the cosmos, tearing through the fabric of reality itself. The Sanctum Sanctorum trembled as Dr. Stephen Strange dropped his teacup, the porcelain shattering against ancient hardwood. His eyes widened, glowing with arcane energy as he sensed it. Not an incursion, not a dimensional shift, but something else entirely. A wound between universes, bleeding power unlike any he had encountered. The Sorcerer Supreme moved swiftly to his chamber of relics, the cloak of levitation billowing behind him as cosmic warning systems flared to life across Earth. In the skies above New York, the atmosphere began to fracture like glass, revealing a swirling vortex of blue energy that pulsed with unnatural rhythm. The tear in reality stretched wider, its edges crackling with power that made the air itself vibrate with tension. Within Avengers Tower, alarms blared. Tony Stark looked up from his workbench, a holographic display showing the anomaly growing over Manhattan. "Friday. Analysis," he commanded, already summoning his armor with a gesture. The AI responded with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Energy signatures are inconsistent with known cosmic phenomena, boss. It's not matching anything in our database. Not Asgardian, not Kree, not Dark Dimension." The billionaire's eyes narrowed as the nanites of his suit flowed over his body. "Call it in. All available Avengers. Now." High above the city streets, the vortex stabilized, its center darkening to reveal stars in impossible configurations. A distant galaxy, perhaps, or the space between universes. Then, from that darkness, a single ship emerged. Black, angular, and predatory, its twin ion engines glowed with malevolent purpose as it cut through the dimensional gateway. The TIE Advanced X-1 starfighter rotated on its axis, weapons systems humming to life as it surveyed this strange new world. Inside the cockpit, a rhythmic, mechanical breathing echoed. The Dark Lord of the Sith had arrived. Darth Vader assessed the alien cityscape below through the red-tinted viewport of his mask. The Force flowed differently here, chaotic and undisciplined, yet powerful beyond measure. He sensed beings of tremendous strength scattered across this world, some shining like beacons, others dark with potential that reminded him of the Emperor himself. His black-gloved hand tightened around the controls of his fighter. This was not the galaxy he knew. The stars were wrong. The Force itself felt altered, as though it had evolved along a different path. But power remained power, and conquest was the way of the Sith. The anomaly had drawn attention beyond the heroes of Earth. In Wakanda, sensors monitored the dimensional breach as King T'Challa received urgent reports from his scientists. In the hidden city of Attilan, Black Bolt watched silently as Medusa arranged their defenses. And deep within the quantum realm, a ripple of disturbance caused Hank Pym to check his instruments with growing concern. Something had entered their universe that did not belong, bringing with it technologies and energies that could upset the balance of power on Earth. As the TIE fighter descended toward Manhattan, its weapons opened fire. Green energy bolts, not repulsor technology nor Chitauri weaponry, slammed into buildings with devastating precision. Citizens fled in terror. As glass and concrete rained down upon the streets, police units responded, their conventional weapons proving useless against the starfighter's reinforced hull. The Dark Lord was announcing his arrival in the only language he truly respected: power, dominance, fear. The first to respond was Sam Wilson, the Falcon, who banked sharply through the urban canyons of New York, his wings gleaming in the sunlight. "I've got eyes on the bogey," he reported through his comms. "Never seen anything like it. Looks military, but no markings I recognize." He spiraled upward, keeping his distance as the fighter continued its assault. It's targeting infrastructure, not civilians. Almost like it's testing defenses rather than causing maximum damage. From the streets below, Wanda Maximoff raised her hands, scarlet energy coalescing between her fingers. With a sharp gesture, she sent a blast of chaos magic toward the alien vessel. The energy connected, momentarily disrupting the fighter's systems. Within the cockpit, Vader felt the strange power wash over his ship, causing the controls to flicker. Interesting. Not the Force as he knew it, but something adjacent, something he could counter. Reaching out with his own power, the Sith Lord extended his consciousness beyond the confines of his vessel. The Force responded to his will, surrounding the Scarlet Witch with invisible pressure. Wanda gasped as her throat constricted, her feet lifting from the ground. The sensation was familiar yet different from when her brother Pietro had once snatched her from danger. This was malevolent, controlled, a deliberate application of power meant to dominate. Her eyes widened in shock as she felt the presence behind the attack. A mind like a fortress of pain and rage, disciplined and focused through decades of suffering. Iron Man arrived in a blur of repulsor fire, targeting the fighter's engines. "Let her go," he demanded, though he had no idea if the pilot could hear or understand him. His sensors struggled to penetrate the unusual alloys of the spacecraft, but he could detect a single life form within. Human, or at least humanoid, but with significant cybernetic components. The readings reminded him uncomfortably of a crude version of his own symbiosis with his armor. Vader released his grip on the witch, turning his attention to this new threat. The armored warrior before him glowed with technology, reminding him of Mandalorian crusaders, yet far more advanced in some ways. The Force flowed strangely around him, as though his very existence bent its currents. With precise control, Vader ignited his lightsaber within the cockpit, then unleashed a wave of telekinetic power that slammed into Iron Man with the force of a Star Destroyer's tractor beam. Tony tumbled backward, stabilizers whining as they fought to compensate. "Friday, what was that? Some kind of repulsor technology?" he asked, righting himself mid-air. The AI responded with confusion. "Negative, boss. No. Energy signature detected. Whatever hit you didn't register on any spectrum." Stark's eyes narrowed behind his faceplate. That was impossible. Energy was energy. It could be manipulated, redirected, but it always left a trace. The battle intensified as more Avengers arrived. Black Widow coordinated police evacuations, while Hawkeye positioned himself on a rooftop, explosive arrows at the ready. Captain America arrived on his motorcycle, shield gleaming as he assessed the situation. The Winter Soldier took up a sniper position, though he held his fire, uncertain if conventional weapons would have any effect on the strange craft. Within the TIE Advanced, Vader made his decision. These warriors were coordinated, disciplined. They protected the civilians rather than using them as shields. Not Sith, then. Something else. Perhaps this world's equivalent of Jedi, though they lacked the uniform approach to the Force he had come to expect. The Dark Lord opened his cockpit, the pressure differential, causing a momentary cloud of condensation to form around his vessel. Then, with calculated dignity, he rose to his full height. The appearance of the figure standing in the open cockpit sent a chill through even the most seasoned Avengers. Nearly 7 feet tall, clad entirely in black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A cape billowed behind him, while a mask resembling a skull concealed any hint of humanity. But most disturbing was the rhythmic, mechanical breathing that carried across the battlefield, a sound that promised death with each exhalation. Doctor Strange arrived through a portal of sparking energy, his hands already weaving protective sigils. "That's not of our reality," he announced, his voice grim. "I can feel the wrongness of his presence here. He's torn a hole between universes." The sorcerer's eyes narrowed as he studied the dark figure. and he's channeling energy unlike anything in our mystical traditions. Not quite magic, not quite science. Vader leapt from his fighter, the force cushioning his landing on a nearby rooftop. The impact still cracked the concrete beneath his boots, a testament to his weight and power. His crimson lightsaber hummed to life, casting an eerie glow across his mask as he surveyed his opponents. These were not stormtroopers or rebel soldiers. Each radiated power in their own way, some technological, others more primal. They would make worthy opponents or valuable servants for the Empire. "I am Darth Vader, Lord of the Sith and Commander of the Imperial Fleet," his baritone voice boomed, amplified by his vocoder. "Your world now belongs to the Galactic Empire. Surrender, and you may be granted the mercy of servitude rather than destruction." The ultimatum hung in the air, absurd in its confidence yet chilling in its absolute conviction. Captain America stepped forward, shield raised. "I think you'll find Earth isn't big on surrendering to tyrants, no matter which galaxy they're from." His voice carried the weight of a man who had faced empire builders before and watched them fall. "We don't know how you got here or what a Sith is, but threatening innocent people ends now." The Sith Lord tilted his head slightly, studying the star-emblazoned warrior. Through the Force, he sensed conviction, courage, and a familiar weight of sacrifice. This one had known war, had made impossible choices. In another reality, he might have made a fine Imperial officer. "Your courage is admirable," Vader acknowledged, "but misplaced. I sense great power among you, undisciplined and wasted in defense of the weak. The Force has brought me to this realm for a purpose." Iron Man hovered nearby, repulsors charged and ready. "Yeah, about that. We're kind of full up on megalomaniacs with delusions of grandeur. Maybe try Mercury." "I hear the property values are killer." His flippancy masked growing concern. Something about this, Vader radiated a cold certainty that reminded him uncomfortably of Thanos. A true believer in his own terrible purpose. The Dark Lord's patience ended. With a gesture that seemed almost casual, he extended his hand towards Stark. The armor around Tony's throat began to compress, metal groaning as unseen pressure dented the alloy. "Your technology is impressive," Vader intoned, "but against the power of the Force, it is nothing." The pressure increased, nanites struggling to compensate for the damage. Doctor Strange reacted instantly, sending a whip of eldritch energy toward the Sith Lord. Vader pivoted, his lightsaber intercepting the mystical attack. Where the energy met the plasma blade, reality itself seemed to shudder, sparks of impossible colors cascading around them. The sorcerer's eyes widened in shock. "His weapon disrupts the dimensional fabric," he warned. "It's like nothing I've encountered before." Released from Vader's Force grip, Iron Man stabilized himself, running diagnostics on his damaged armor. "Great. A space wizard with a laser sword and telekinesis. Just what we needed this Tuesday." He fired a repulsor blast, aiming for Vader's chest plate. The Sith Lord deflected it with his lightsaber, sending the energy careening into a nearby water tower. Steam exploded outward as the structure collapsed. Captain America threw his shield with perfect precision, the vibranium disc curving through the air toward the back of Vader's helmet. Without turning, the Sith Lord reached backward with the Force, catching the shield in mid-flight. It hung suspended for a moment before Vader examined it with genuine curiosity. "Remarkable material," he observed, feeling the resonance of the metal through the Force. "Not unlike Beskar." Then, with a flick of his wrist, he sent it hurtling back toward Rogers with twice the force. Steve barely raised his arm in time, the shield slamming into him with enough power to drive him backward across the rooftop. He skidded to a halt near the edge, momentarily winded by the impact. "He's stronger than he looks," he warned through gritted teeth, "and he's predicting our moves somehow." The battle escalated as Hawkeye loosed a volley of explosive arrows. Vader extended his hand, the projectiles freezing in mid-air before their momentum reversed, sending them back toward their origin. Clint dove from his perch just as the rooftop erupted in flames. The Winter Soldier opened fire with his rifle, only to watch in disbelief as Vader's lightsaber intercepted each bullet, the plasma blade moving faster than the eye could track. Wanda Maximoff recovered from the earlier attack, her eyes glowing crimson as she tapped into her chaos magic. "Get out of his head," she whispered, reaching out with her powers to touch the mind behind the mask. What she encountered made her stagger backward in horror, pain beyond measure, a burning agony that never ceased. Betrayal so profound it had shattered a soul into fragments. And beneath it all, a core of such intense self-hatred that it fueled his every action like a reactor powered by pure suffering. The mental contact was not one-sided. Vader felt the intrusion and retaliated, his own force abilities probing the Scarlet Witch's consciousness. Images flashed between them. A twin brother, lost. A synthezoid lover, sacrificed. Guilt and power intertwined. The Sith Lord withdrew, momentarily intrigued by the emotional maelstrom he had glimpsed. "Your pain gives you strength," he acknowledged, "but you lack the will to use it properly." Dr. Strange recognized the danger of a prolonged battle in the heart of New York. With precise movements, he opened a portal directly beneath the Sith Lord's feet. Vader sensed the trap, but too late, gravity pulling him through the gateway before he could leap clear. He fell through, sparking energy, emerging high above the city, momentarily disoriented by the sudden transition. Iron Man seized the opportunity, rocketing upward to deliver a powerful blow to Vader's chestplate. The impact sent the Sith Lord tumbling through the air, his cape whipping around him as he fought to regain control. But even in apparent vulnerability, Vader remained deadly. His lightsaber carved a burning arc, slicing through one of Tony's boot repulsors. As Stark spiraled away, Vader stabilized himself with the Force, hovering in defiance of gravity. Below, Strange watched with growing concern. "He's adapting to our methods too quickly," he warned the others. "We need to contain him before he fully understands what he's dealing with." The sorcerer began an intricate spell, golden mandalas forming around his hands as he prepared to banish the intruder to the mirror dimension. Vader sensed the gathering power. The Force flowed differently around the caped sorcerer, reminding him distantly of the witches of Dathomir, not Jedi methodology, but something ancient and disciplined in its own tradition, dangerous. With grim determination, the Sith Lord plummeted toward Strange, lightsaber, extended for a killing blow. Captain America intercepted him, shield raised to catch the plasma blade. Vibranium met lightsaber in a shower of sparks and a sound like tearing metal. The shield held, but Steve could feel the incredible heat radiating from the point of contact. "Whatever that sword is made of, it's not normal energy," he grunted, muscles straining against Vader's inhuman strength. "It is a lightsaber, the weapon of a more civilized age," the Sith Lord replied, pressing his advantage. "Your primitive materials are impressive, but they will eventually yield." As if to emphasize his point, he increased the pressure, the edge of his blade beginning to leave a glowing score mark across the shield's surface. The stalemate was broken by a thunderous crack as a bolt of lightning struck Vader from behind. Thor had arrived, Stormbreaker in hand, his eyes glowing with electrical energy. "Return to your realm, Dark One," the Asgardian commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a god. "You trespass on a world under my protection." Vader turned to face this new threat, genuinely impressed by the power he sensed. This being channeled energy similar to Force lightning, yet with a control and focus that surpassed even the Emperor's abilities. "Your power is remarkable," the Sith acknowledged, "but I serve a master whose reach extends across galaxies." He raised his lightsaber in salute, recognizing a worthy opponent. Thor responded with another lightning strike, more focused than the first. Vader caught it on his lightsaber blade, the plasma containing and channeling the electrical energy. For a moment, the Sith Lord's respirator faltered under the strain, his breathing becoming labored. A limitation. A vulnerability that the Avengers noted instantly. "His life support is susceptible to power surges," Tony observed, his armor's systems recalibrating after the damage. Friday, analyze respiratory patterns and targeting solutions. The AI complied, projecting a holographic model of Vader's armor, highlighting the chest plate and belt-mounted controls. Dr. Strange completed his spell, reality warping around the combatants as the mirror dimension began to envelop them. Vader sensed the fundamental shift in the Force, the rules of physics bending around him. With a roar of effort, he unleashed a Force repulse, a spherical wave of telekinetic energy that disrupted Strange's concentration and shattered the half-formed dimensional portal. The feedback sent the sorcerer staggering backward, blood trickling from his nose. "He's too powerful for conventional containment," Strange admitted, wiping the blood away with the back of his hand. "We need to understand what he is before we can effectively counter him." As the battle continued, SHIELD forces established a perimeter around the engagement zone. Director Maria Hill coordinated with local authorities, her expression grim as she watched the Avengers struggle against a single opponent. "Get me everything we have on dimensional incursions and parallel universes," she ordered. "And put a call in to Dr. Foster and Dr. Selvig. If this thing came through a portal, I want to know if we can send it back the same way." Vader recognized the military response forming around him. These forces were more organized than the Rebel Alliance, their technology more uniform and advanced. A true planetary defense system rather than a desperate insurgency. Conquering such a world would require more than his personal might. It would demand the full power of the Imperial fleet. With a gesture, he summoned his TIE fighter to his position, the craft responding to his command through the specialized systems he had personally modified. As it approached, Iron Man attempted to intercept, firing a unibeam directly into the ship's port solar panel. The energy weapon burned through the array, sending the fighter into a spin that Vader immediately corrected with the Force, guiding it to a landing on the rooftop beside him. "He's trying to escape," Sam Wilson called out, swooping low for a strafing run with his wing-mounted weapons. The bullets bounced harmlessly off Vader's armor, the Beskar-infused plates dispersing the kinetic energy. The Sith Lord responded with a precise Force push that sent Falcon tumbling through the air, his wings momentarily failing under the stress. Captain America coordinated with Black Widow and Hawkeye, the three moving in practiced formation to flank the Dark Lord. "We need to disable that ship," Steve directed. "Stark, can you get inside and sabotage it?" Tony was already moving, nanites reconfiguring to repair his damaged repulsor as he approached the TIE fighter from below. Vader sensed the strategy forming around him. These warriors fought with a coordination that spoke of years of trust and shared battle, not unlike the clone troopers of the Republic, but with individual styles that complemented rather than mirrored each other. He had underestimated them, a mistake he would not repeat. Reaching deep into the dark side, Vader channeled his pain and rage into raw power. The temperature around him plummeted, frost forming on the rooftop as he drew upon reserves that had made him the most feared enforcer in the galaxy. With a thunderous gesture, he unleashed a Force wave of unprecedented magnitude, sending Avengers tumbling in all directions. Captain America dug his shield into the rooftop, anchoring himself against the telekinetic storm. Thor stood his ground, Stormbreaker absorbing some of the energy. The others were not so fortunate. Black Widow and Hawkeye were thrown clear off the building, saved only by Iron Man's swift intervention as he abandoned his approach to the TIE fighter. Dr. Strange created a shield of mystical energy, but even he was driven to one knee by the sheer power of Vader's assault. In the momentary advantage, Vader leapt into his fighter's cockpit, the systems coming online at his command. The damaged solar array would limit his maneuverability and weapon capability, but the craft remained spaceworthy. He needed to assess this world from orbit, to understand its defenses and power structures, before committing to a full engagement. As the TIE fighter began to rise, Wanda Maximoff made a desperate attempt to prevent his escape. Her chaos magic enveloped the ship, scarlet energy prying at the very molecules of its hull. Vader felt the strange power attempting to dismantle his vessel and responded with equal desperation, channeling the Force into a protective barrier around the critical systems. The strain was immense, sweat beading under his mask as he fought against the witch's incredible abilities. Her power was unlike anything in his experience, manipulating probability itself rather than simply applying force. Had the Emperor known of such abilities, he would have coveted them above all others. Thor provided the decisive intervention, hurling Stormbreaker with godly strength. Enchanted Axe struck the TIE fighter's remaining solar panel, shearing it clean off. The craft lurched violently, its propulsion systems failing as it began to plummet toward the streets below. Vader abandoned the controls, focusing instead on protecting himself from the impending impact. The fighter crashed into an intersection, the specialized alloys of its hull preventing a catastrophic explosion but still sending shrapnel in all directions. A telekinetic bubble surrounded Vader himself, the Force absorbing the worst of the impact as he was thrown clear of the wreckage. He landed in a three-point stance, lightsaber igniting immediately as he prepared to continue the battle on foot. The Avengers regrouped around the crash site, civilians already evacuated from the immediate area thanks to SHIELD's efficient response. Vader stood alone in the center of the crater formed by his ship, his cape settling around him as his breathing continued its mechanical rhythm. The damage to his armor was minimal, testament to its advanced construction, but the same could not be said for his vessel. "Surrender," Captain America offered, his shield raised defensively. "You're outnumbered, your ship is destroyed, and we have no desire to continue this fight if we don't have to." Vader considered his options with tactical precision. His mission to scout this new realm had yielded valuable information, but without his TIE fighter, he had no means of reporting back to the Empire. Nor could he summon reinforcements. For the moment, he was truly alone in a universe not his own, but solitude was nothing new to the Dark Lord. He had walked alone since the fires of Mustafar. "Your compassion is misplaced," Vader replied, his lightsaber humming with deadly promise. "If our positions were reversed, I would grant no such mercy." With that declaration, he launched himself toward Captain America, his speed enhanced by the Force to cross the distance in a heartbeat. Steve barely managed to raise his shield in time, the lightsaber impacting with enough force to drive him backward. The vibranium absorbed the energy of the blow, but the heat of the blade was intense enough that Rogers could feel it through his uniform. Before Vader could strike again, Mjolnir struck him squarely in the chest, sending him crashing into the side of a building. Thor recalled his hammer, lightning crackling around him as he prepared another assault. "His strength is formidable," the Asgardian acknowledged, "but he tires. The machine parts that sustain him draw power with each exertion." Iron Man circled above, sensors confirming Thor's assessment. "His armor's running hot, especially around the life support systems. Whatever's keeping him alive in there isn't designed for prolonged combat at this intensity." Tony's analytical mind was already formulating contingencies, ways to exploit the weakness without killing their opponent. Vader emerged from the rubble, his movements slightly slower but no less deadly. Through the Force, he could sense the fatigue in his cybernetic systems, the strain on his damaged lungs, as his respirator struggled to compensate for his exertions. These were limitations he had lived with for decades, the price of his transformation into more machine than man. Dr. Strange approached cautiously, his hands weaving protective sigils. "We don't need to be enemies," he offered, his tone measured. "I can sense you're not from our reality. Perhaps together we can find a way to return you to your proper universe." The Sith Lord paused, studying the sorcerer through the red-tinted lenses of his mask. The Force flowed strangely around this one, disciplined yet flexible in ways that reminded him of the most accomplished Jedi masters. "You believe you can control the boundaries between realities," Vader observed. "An impressive claim." "Not control," Strange corrected. "Understand. Navigate. There are rules to the multiverse, laws that even beings of our power must respect." He gestured, creating a small visual representation of interconnected dimensions. Your presence here causes instability. The longer you remain, the greater the risk to both our realities." For the first time, Vader felt uncertainty. The Emperor had spoken of other dimensions, other possibilities beyond the known galaxy, but even he had never claimed the ability to traverse them. If this sorcerer spoke the truth, then the Dark Lord's arrival here might not have been mere chance. The Force worked with purpose, even across the boundaries of universes. "And if I refuse your assistance?" Vader questioned, lightsaber still humming at his side. Iron Man landed nearby, his armor's weapons systems trained on the Sith Lord. "Then we keep fighting until one side can't anymore," Stark replied bluntly. "And while you're impressive, I'm betting on the home team. We've stopped invasions from beings who called themselves gods. You're just the warm-up act." Thor stepped forward. Stormbreaker held ready. "Your powers are mighty, Dark One, but they have limits we've already begun to measure. This need not end in your destruction." The Asgardian spoke with the weight of thousands of years of warfare behind his words. He had seen enemies become allies before, had witnessed the redemption of his own brother. Such transformations were rare but possible. Vader sensed no deception in their offers, only resolve. These warriors would continue fighting regardless of the cost to themselves. Such determination was worthy of respect, even from a Sith, and in truth, his options were limited. Without his ship, he had no means of either escape or conquest. Strategy demanded flexibility. Very well, he deactivated his lightsaber, the crimson blade disappearing with a distinctive hiss. "I will accompany you to further discuss these matters of reality and dimension." His acquiescence was not surrender, merely a tactical withdrawal to gather more information. The dark side would show him the path forward, as it always had. Captain America nodded to Maria Hill, who approached with a squad of SHIELD agents. "We'll need to secure his weapons and place him in containment until we understand exactly what we're dealing with," she stated, her tone professional despite the extraordinary nature of the situation. Vader turned his masked gaze toward her, the sound of his breathing filling the momentary silence. "You believe you can contain me?" The question held no threat, merely curiosity. "Your technology is advanced, but the Force cannot be so easily restrained." Dr. Strange intervened before tensions could escalate again. "We have facilities designed to hold beings of considerable power," he explained, "not as prisoners, but for the safety of all concerned while we work to resolve dimensional incursions." He did not mention that these same facilities had failed to hold Loki, or that Wanda herself had once escaped from the Avengers compound despite their best precautions. The Sith Lord considered this, then inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Lead on, then. But know that my cooperation extends only as far as my interest in your knowledge of interdimensional transit." The warning was clear. This was an armistice, not a surrender. As they prepared to transport their unusual visitor, Tony approached Steve with a private observation. "Is it just me, or does tall, dark, and asthmatic remind you of someone? That whole 'I am the superior being' vibe has a familiar ring to it." Rogers nodded grimly. "Megalomaniac with overwhelming power and a messiah complex. We've seen that playbook before. Let's just hope this one's more open to reason than Thanos was." The comparison was apt in some ways, but Steve sensed something different in Vader. Not just conviction in a cause, but a personal anguish that drove him forward, pain rather than purpose. The convoy of vehicles traveled through the streets of New York toward the Avengers compound upstate. Inside the specialized containment vehicle, Darth Vader sat motionless, his breathing the only sound in the reinforced chamber. Through the Force, he extended his awareness, mapping the route, noting security measures, assessing the technology that surrounded him. Knowledge was power, and the Sith Lord was nothing if not patient. At the compound, a secure facility had been hastily prepared. Based on designs originally intended to contain enhanced individuals, it featured reinforced walls, energy-dampening fields, and constant monitoring. As Vader was escorted inside, he observed everything with meticulous attention, from the guard rotations to the control systems for the security doors. These quarters should be adequate until we determine next steps, Maria Hill explained, gesturing to the cell that was more like a Spartan apartment than a prison. You'll have access to basic amenities, but your weapons will remain in our custody. Vader entered the space without comment, taking in the simple furnishings that seemed almost comically undersized for his imposing frame. The reinforced bed might support his weight, but little else was designed with a cyborg Sith Lord in mind. "Your precautions are unnecessary," he finally stated. "If I wished to leave, these barriers would provide little impediment." "Maybe," Hill acknowledged, "but they'd slow you down long enough for the response team to arrive. And I think you've already seen what they're capable of." Her confidence was not bravado. The Battle of New York had taught SHIELD many lessons about containing powerful beings, lessons written in blood and rubble. As the security team withdrew, leaving Vader alone in his confinement, the Sith Lord seated himself on the floor in a meditative posture. The Force flowed differently in this reality, but it remained accessible to his trained senses. He reached out, feeling the energies of the compound around him, the auras of power that marked the Avengers as they discussed his fate. In the conference room, those same Avengers gathered with Nick Fury, who had arrived via Quinjet as soon as the situation was contained. The former director of SHIELD stood at the head of the table, his expression characteristically grave as he reviewed the footage from the confrontation in Manhattan. "So," he began, his single eye fixed on the holographic image of Vader frozen mid-battle, lightsaber raised against Captain America's shield. "Anyone want to explain to me how we ended up with Darth Vader in our detention facility?" The question was met with a moment of surprised silence before Tony spoke up. "Wait, you know who he is? I thought he was just some interdimensional warlord with a breathing condition and anger management issues." Fury's expression suggested he was questioning Stark's intelligence. "The helmet, the cape, the laser sword, and the whole 'join me and rule the galaxy' speech? He's from Star Wars, Stark. One of the most successful film franchises in history." "Film?" Thor questioned, his brow furrowing in confusion. "You believe this warrior is a fictional creation?" "Not anymore," Fury replied grimly. "But in our world, Darth Vader is a character from a series of movies about a galactic conflict between rebels and an empire, which raises some interesting questions about the nature of fiction and reality across dimensions." Dr. Strange leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. "The multiverse theory suggests infinite variations of reality. In some, what we consider fiction may be historical fact. The dimensional boundaries sometimes thin enough for information to bleed through, inspiring stories that reflect actual events in parallel worlds. So George Lucas might have been receiving psychic visions from another galaxy far, far away." Stark sounded skeptical. "That's a stretch, even for us." "Actually, it's not unprecedented," Bruce Banner interjected, having arrived after the battle to assist with analysis. "There are documented cases of authors and creators having nearly identical ideas simultaneously, despite no contact between them. Jung called it the collective unconscious, but it could be interpreted as dimensional bleed-through." Wanda had been quiet until now, her experience during the battle still troubling her. "I touched his mind," she finally shared. "Just for a moment, but what I felt." She shuddered visibly. "There's so much pain, burning, betrayal. He lost everything, including most of his own body. The suit isn't a costume, it's a life support system." Captain America considered this new information with growing concern. If he is the character from the films, then we're dealing with someone responsible for genocide on a planetary scale. He helped build and deploy a weapon that destroyed entire worlds. "Not yet," Fury corrected. "According to the timeline of the films, Vader's fall to the dark side was relatively recent. The Death Star may not exist in his reality at the point he was pulled through to ours." Strange nodded in agreement. The dimensional rift seemed to open in response to some form of temporal disturbance as well. He may be from his universe's past, relative to the events depicted in the later films. Great, Tony sighed. So we've got pre-genocide Vader instead of post-genocide Vader. That's so much better. His sarcasm masked genuine concern. If this being was even half as powerful as the character from the films, they were dealing with a threat level comparable to some of their most dangerous adversaries. Thor, who had been contemplating the situation, finally spoke. If he is indeed this character of legend in your world, then you have knowledge he does not possess. You know his future, his weaknesses, perhaps even his redemption if these stories end as many do, with the villain finding his way back to the light. The observation was astute, causing the others to consider the strategic advantage such knowledge might provide. Fury pulled up additional files on a secure server, displaying information about the Star Wars franchise that SHIELD had compiled as part of its cultural database. According to the original trilogy, Vader eventually turns against the Emperor to save his son, Luke Skywalker. He dies in the process, but returns to the light side of the Force. Fury swiped through additional images, showing the character's progression through the films. The prequels established that before becoming Vader, he was Anakin Skywalker, a Jedi Knight who fell to the dark side, believing it was the only way to save his wife from death during childbirth. A tragic figure then, Thor mused, not simply a monster, a warrior who made terrible choices for what he believed were the right reasons. Wanda nodded, the resonance with her own past choices uncomfortably clear. The pain in his mind, it's not just physical. He hates himself more than anyone else. Every breath is a reminder of his failures. Be that as it may, Steve cautioned, we can't forget what he's capable of. Good intentions don't erase consequences, and redemption isn't guaranteed just because it happened in a movie. Dr. Strange had been consulting his mystical instruments throughout the discussion, his expression growing increasingly troubled. We have a more immediate problem, he announced. The dimensional rift hasn't fully closed. It's stabilized temporarily, but it's still there, like a scar in reality, and it's growing wider. The implications were immediately clear to everyone in the room. If it keeps expanding, Bruce theorized, we could be looking at more visitors from his universe. Or worse, parts of our reality could start bleeding into his. Or both, Fury concluded grimly, which means our priority has to be closing that rift and sending our guest back where he came from before we have a full-scale interdimensional crisis on our hands. In his cell, Vader had reached a similar conclusion through his meditation. The Force disturbance that had brought him to this reality was not dissipating as expected. Instead, it seemed to be growing, becoming more defined rather than fading. Such a phenomenon was beyond even his considerable experience, but he recognized the danger it presented. If the Emperor were to discover this pathway between dimensions, the consequences would be unimaginable. Palpatine's hunger for power knew no bounds, and access to a universe of new subjects, new technologies, and new Force wielders would be irresistible to him. The thought sent a rare chill through Vader's cybernetic spine. His master's cruelty was absolute, and this world, for all its defenders, would suffer greatly under his rule. The Dark Lord opened his eyes as the cell door slid open, revealing Dr. Strange accompanied by Wanda Maximoff. An interesting pairing, Vader noted. The disciplined sorcerer and the chaotic witch, both powerful in their distinct traditions. The dimensional rift is expanding, Strange stated without preamble. I believe you've sensed this already. Vader rose to his full height, towering over both visitors. Yes, the Force disturbance grows stronger, not weaker. An unusual phenomenon, even for interstellar travel. He studied the sorcerer with new interest. You claim knowledge of these matters beyond my experience. Strange nodded, creating a visual representation of the rift using his mystical energies. In our reality, the multiverse is a studied phenomenon. There are established methods for traveling between dimensions, though not without risk. The glowing model showed the tear between their worlds, pulsing with unstable energy. If the breach continues to widen, Wanda added, both our realities could face catastrophic consequences. Reality itself could break down along the boundaries. Vader considered this with the strategic mind that had made him the Emperor's most effective enforcer. And you believe my presence here is connected to this instability, that returning me to my proper dimension may seal the breach. It's our working theory, Strange confirmed. The rift appeared simultaneously with your arrival. The dimensional energies seem to be focused around you specifically, as though you're the anchor point for the connection between our universes. The Sith Lord turned away, his cape settling around him as he contemplated this information. And if I choose not to return? If I find this reality more advantageous to my purposes? The question was delivered in his usual monotone, but the implied threat was clear. Wanda stepped forward, her eyes beginning to glow with scarlet energy. Then you condemn countless beings in both universes to suffering and possibly death as the dimensional boundary collapses. Her voice carried an edge of personal knowledge, of someone who had witnessed the consequences of such power misused. Vader regarded her thoughtfully. Through the Force, he sensed her conviction, her intimate familiarity with grief and responsibility. You speak from experience, Witch. You have tampered with forces beyond your control before, and others paid the price for your ambition. The accusation struck home, causing Wanda to flinch visibly. Strange placed a steadying hand on her shoulder before addressing Vader again. We all have regrets, choices we would unmake if we could. But the past remains fixed. It's our response to those failures that defines us. A Jedi platitude, Vader dismissed, though something in the words resonated uncomfortably within him. Failure is merely a lesson on the path to power. The weak allow regret to diminish them. The strong use it to fuel their ascension. And what has your ascension cost you? Wanda challenged, regaining her composure. I've felt the emptiness inside you, the hollow where your heart should be. Is that strength? The Sith Lord's mechanical breathing filled the silence that followed, each exhalation carrying the weight of decades of suffering. You know nothing of strength, child, nor of sacrifice. His gloved hand clenched, the leather creaking with the force of his grip. But you will learn, as all do eventually. Power demands payment, always. Strange recognized the conversation was veering into dangerous territory. We're not here to debate philosophy, he redirected. We need to address the dimensional rift before it's too late. That requires your cooperation. Vader turned back to face them, his mask impassive yet somehow conveying a sense of grim amusement. And what exactly do you propose, sorcerer? A spell? A ritual? Some technological marvel that will send me back to a galaxy at war? All of the above, Tony Stark announced, entering the cell with Bruce Banner close behind. We've been analyzing the energy signatures from the rift. It's a unique blend of quantum fluctuations, mystical energies, and something else our instruments can't quite identify. The Force, Vader stated flatly. What your science cannot measure, what your sorcery only approximates. The fundamental energy field that binds all living things, that flows through and around all matter. Banner adjusted his glasses, his scientific curiosity overcoming his wariness of the intimidating figure before him. That actually aligns with some theoretical work I've done on quantum entanglement at the macro scale. If this force operates as a binding element across dimensional boundaries, it could explain why the rift formed around you specifically. Stark nodded, pulling up holographic models from his portable interface. We've been working with Strange on a potential solution. A device that can harness and redirect the dimensional energies, creating a stable pathway back to your reality. But it would require a power source capable of jump-starting the process. Vader immediately understood the implication. My lightsaber crystal. You believe the Kyber can serve as this power source? It was not a question. The Sith Lord had extensive knowledge of Kyber crystals and their unique properties. The one in his lightsaber, bled red through his own pain and rage, was particularly attuned to his Force signature. "The energy readings from your weapon were off the charts," Tony confirmed. "It's not just a laser sword, it's channeling something fundamentally similar to what's keeping the rift open. If we can use it as a catalyst, we might be able to create a controlled closure event." "And if this fails?" Vader questioned, his tone making it clear he already anticipated the answer. Strange met his gaze unflinchingly. "Then the best-case scenario is that you remain trapped here, while both our realities suffer increasing instability. Worst case, the backlash destroys you, us, and potentially large portions of both universes." The Dark Lord absorbed this information with characteristic stoicism. The risk was substantial, but the alternative was unacceptable, even to one as ruthless as he had become. If the Emperor gained access to this dimension, the suffering would be incalculable. And despite everything, despite the darkness that had consumed Anakin Skywalker, some small part of him still rebelled at the thought of such needless devastation. "Very well," he finally agreed. "I will cooperate with your efforts to repair this breach. But I require assurances that your method will indeed return me to my proper time and place, not some distant point in my galaxy's past or future." "That's the trick," Bruce explained. "The temporal coordinates are as important as the spatial ones. We'll need to calibrate precisely to ensure you return to the moment you left. Otherwise, the displacement could have unpredictable consequences for your timeline." Vader considered this complication with growing concern. Time travel was theoretical even in the most advanced Imperial research. The implications of returning at the wrong moment could be catastrophic for the carefully balanced plans he had been orchestrating against the Emperor. "To achieve this calibration," he inquired, "what would be required of me?" Strange exchanged glances with wonder before answering. "A detailed mental impression of your exact circumstances before the transition. The more precise your recollection, the more accurately we can target the return trajectory." The request carried obvious dangers. To allow these strangers access to his thoughts was to risk exposing vulnerabilities, plans, even the fragile remnants of Anakin Skywalker that still existed beneath the armor of Darth Vader. Yet the alternative was worse. "I will provide what is necessary," the Sith Lord conceded, "but be warned. The dark side does not yield its secrets easily, even to those with your considerable talents." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Mental intrusion would not be without consequences for the intruder. As preparations began for the attempt to close the dimensional rift, activity at the Avengers compound increased dramatically. Jane Foster and Eric Selvig arrived to consult on the theoretical aspects of interdimensional travel, while Tony and Bruce worked to construct the physical components of the device that would harness and redirect the energy of the breach. In the central laboratory, Vader's lightsaber had been carefully placed in a specialized containment field, its kyber crystal accessible but still connected to the weapon's internal mechanisms. The Sith Lord himself stood nearby, unwilling to allow his most personal possession to be examined without his direct supervision. "The design is elegant," Tony admitted, studying the internal components with genuine admiration. Focused plasma contained and shaped by electromagnetic fields, powered by a crystal that somehow amplifies energy beyond its theoretical limits. "Whoever built this was a genius. I constructed it myself," Vader stated, an unexpected note of pride in his mechanical voice. "It is the tradition of both Sith and Jedi to create their own weapons, attuned to their individual connection to the Force." Bruce looked up from his calculations, curiosity overcoming his usual reserve. "You mentioned these kyber crystals before. They sound similar to some energy-focusing materials we've encountered, but the efficiency is off the charts." "Kyber crystals are semi-sentient," the Dark Lord explained, surprising himself with his willingness to share such knowledge. "They resonate with their wielder, strengthening the connection to the Force. In their natural state, they produce blades of blue or green energy. The red of my saber comes from the process of bending the crystal to the dark side, causing it to bleed." The clinical description couldn't disguise the emotional weight behind the words. Wanda, who had been quietly observing, caught fragmentary images from Vader's mind. A cave of crystal, meditation, pain channeled into the heart of the stone until it cracked and reformed, transformed by suffering into something more deadly. "It's beautiful, in a terrible way," she observed softly, "like you forced your own pain into it, making it share your burden." Vader turned to her, the mask hiding whatever expression might have crossed his ruined features. "You understand more than you should, Witch. Be careful with such insights. They have destroyed wiser minds than yours." The warning held no malice, almost sounding like genuine concern. It was moments like these that confused the Avengers most about their visitor. Glimpses of something other than the merciless enforcer, brief suggestions that beneath the armor and darkness lay something more complex than simple evil. As night fell over the compound, Doctor Strange completed the mystical components of their plan. Arcane symbols adorned the laboratory floor, their patterns echoing the quantum equations Banner had developed. At the center stood a device of Stark's design, a framework of advanced materials surrounding a space large enough for Vader to stand within. "The theory is sound," Strange explained to the assembled team. "The Kyber crystal will serve as a focal point for both the mystical energies I'll channel and the quantum field Tony and Bruce have generated. Meanwhile, Wanda will use her connection to Vader's mind to ensure the temporal coordinates align properly." Captain America looked troubled by the complexity of the plan. "And if something goes wrong? What's our contingency?" "Run," Tony suggested with gallows humor, "preferably to another solar system." Thor, who had been examining the mystical symbols with experienced eyes, shook his head. "If this fails catastrophically, distance will provide little safety. The dimensional energies unleashed could potentially affect reality itself within a significant radius." "That's comforting," Clint muttered from his position near the door. "Bow at the ready, despite the questionable usefulness of arrows against dimensional catastrophe." Vader himself remained calm, his breathing steady as he prepared for the attempt. Through the Force, he could feel the energies gathering, the potential for either salvation or destruction building around them. It reminded him distantly of moments in the Jedi Temple when great works of Force manipulation had been attempted by the Masters of old. "We should proceed," he stated, moving toward the center of the apparatus. "The dimensional distortion grows stronger with each passing hour. Soon, it may become uncontainable regardless of our efforts." Dr. Strange nodded in agreement, taking his position at one of the cardinal points around the device. Wanda stood opposite him, while Bruce manned the control systems Tony had designed. Thor and Captain America remained at the perimeter, ready to intervene if something unexpected occurred. "The process will unfold in stages," Strange explained as Vader stepped into the central chamber. "First, we'll establish a stable connection to the rift, using the energy signature of Taking Formus, your lightsaber. Then, Wanda will help you focus on the exact moment of your transition, creating a temporal anchor. Finally, I'll channel the mystical energies necessary to open a controlled pathway, while Tony's device maintains structural integrity around the passage." The Sith Lord inclined his head in understanding, then extended his hand. "My lightsaber. I will require it for the transition." The request was reasonable. The weapon was attuned to him specifically, and would help maintain the connection between Vader and his home dimension. After a moment's hesitation, Tony released the containment field, allowing the lightsaber to levitate toward its master. Vader grasped it firmly, the familiar weight centering him as he prepared for whatever was to come. "Beginning quantum field generation," Bruce announced, activating the first sequence of controls. The air around the apparatus began to shimmer with barely visible energy, reality itself seeming to ripple like the surface of a disturbed pond. Strange raised his hands, mystical mandalas forming around his fingers as he began the incantation that would focus these energies into a coherent pattern. Ancient words of power echoed through the laboratory, each syllable resonating with the quantum fluctuations in perfect harmony. Wanda approached Vader, her expression determined despite her obvious apprehension. "I need to establish a connection to your mind," she explained. "Not to control, only to guide. Focus on the moment before you arrived here. Every detail, every sensation." The Dark Lord regarded her silently for a moment, then nodded once. "Proceed. But be warned, the darkness you will find there is not easily navigated. Do not lose yourself in it." As Wanda's consciousness touched Vader's, the laboratory around them seemed to fade into the background. Images flooded between them, memories of staggering clarity and emotional intensity. A desert world with twin suns, a woman's gentle smile, her face blurred by time and grief, the flash of a blue lightsaber, betrayal, fire-consuming flesh, the first breath through a mask that would become his prison and salvation. Wanda struggled to maintain her focus amidst the maelstrom of Vader's psyche. The pain was overwhelming, a constant companion that had shaped him for decades. But beneath it, buried so deeply that perhaps even he had forgotten its existence, was something else. A faint light, a remnant of the man he had been before the darkness claimed him. "I see it," she whispered, both to Vader and to the others monitoring the process. The moment of transition. He was in his meditation chamber aboard his flagship. There was a disturbance in the Force, a ripple that became a tidal wave. He reached out to understand it, and it pulled him through. The imagery sharpened, becoming more defined as Vader himself focused on the memory. The Star Destroyer Executor, his private sanctum where the helmet could be removed, allowing him rare moments, without the constant pressure of the mask. A tremor in the Force unlike any he had experienced before. His consciousness extending toward it. Curious despite years of cynicism. As the recollection solidified, the energy around the apparatus intensified. Strange's mystical patterns aligned with the quantum field, creating a visible distortion in the center of the chamber. A rift began to form, small at first but growing steadily, revealing glimpses of another reality beyond. "Temporal alignment achieved," Bruce called out, his voice tense with concentration. "Spatial coordinates locked. The pathway is forming, but it's unstable." Stark's instruments showed dangerous fluctuations in the quantum field. "We need more power to stabilize the transition point," he warned, adjusting controls frantically. "The rift wants to expand too quickly. We need to control the flow rate." Vader understood instinctively what was required. Raising his lightsaber, he ignited the crimson blade. The Kyber, crystal within hummed with power, resonating with the energies surrounding them. Through the Force, he channeled his will into the crystal, focusing its output to match the frequency of the dimensional gateway. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The rift stabilized, its edges becoming more defined as the chaotic energies aligned with the Kyber's resonance. Beyond the opening, the interior of Vader's meditation chamber became visible, exactly as he had left it. "It's working," Strange confirmed, his voice strained by the effort of maintaining the mystical binding. "But we can't hold it for long. You need to go through now, while the alignment is perfect." Vader turned to face the assembled Avengers, his mask expressionless yet somehow conveying a sense of solemn acknowledgement. "Your world is fortunate to have such guardians," he stated, the closest to praise they had heard from him. "In my reality, such power would be coveted by the Emperor, bent to serve his will alone." "And what will you do when you return?" Steve asked, voicing the concern they all shared. "You've seen another possibility here, a world where power serves protection rather than domination." The Sith Lord was silent for a moment, his breathing the only sound as the gateway pulsed with energy behind him. "The future is always in motion," he finally answered, echoing wisdom he had once dismissed. "Even for those bound by destiny." With those cryptic words, he turned and stepped through the rift, his cape billowing behind him as he crossed the threshold between dimensions. The moment he passed through, the gateway began to collapse, the energies that had maintained it dissipating rapidly. Strange and Wanda worked in tandem to control the closure, preventing the backlash that could have devastated the compound. The mystical symbols faded, the quantum field dispersed, and reality settled back into its normal patterns. Where the rift had been, only empty air remained, with no trace of the visitor from another galaxy. In the silence that followed, the Avengers exchanged glances of mingled relief and uncertainty. Did we just help Darth Vader get back to terrorizing his own galaxy? Clint finally asked, voicing the moral ambiguity they all felt. We prevented a dimensional catastrophe, Strange reminded him, though his own expression suggested the question had merit. What he does with his second chance is beyond our control. Wanda looked troubled, her connection to Vader's mind having left a profound impression. There was light in him still, she said softly, buried deep but not extinguished. I felt it. Let's hope that matters, Steve replied, his expression grim yet thoughtful. Sometimes people surprise you, even the ones you least expect. As the team dispersed to recover from the ordeal, sensors throughout the compound confirmed what Strange had already sensed. The dimensional disturbance had completely subsided. The boundary between realities had healed, leaving no trace of the extraordinary visitor who had briefly walked among them. Darth Vader had returned to his proper place in the cosmic order, to a destiny that might yet unfold differently than before. In the vast darkness of space aboard the superstar destroyer Executor, Darth Vader stood in his meditation chamber, his mask reattached after the brief respite its removal had provided. Through the viewport, stars streaked by as the Imperial fleet continued its relentless hunt for the Rebel Alliance. Nothing had changed, yet everything was different. The experience in the other reality had left him with knowledge no other being in his galaxy possessed. A glimpse of possibilities beyond the narrow path the Emperor had laid before him. Warriors who wielded power without surrendering to corruption, a team bound by choice rather than fear, and most troubling of all, the faintest suggestion that redemption might not be entirely beyond his reach. Such thoughts were dangerous, treasonous, even by the standards of the Sith. But as he gazed out at the infinite stars, Vader allowed them to linger in his consciousness. The future was indeed always in motion, and perhaps, just perhaps, the darkness was not as absolute as he had believed.